Hey guys, this is Mike from Deepwood Force of Will here, coming at you with another deck profile. I know this one has been one that's been a long time coming. This is one that a lot of people have requested, a lot of people have been asking for. This is the zero control build that our buddy Anthony brought to one of our latest duel video series. You've probably seen that before. It happened a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately a lot of backlog has caused this to be a little bit delayed. But I've got the deck profile here. This comes straight from Anthony, who thanked you all for asking for the deck profile, of course. And he asks you, show your zero builds. He loves playing with zero. He's played with her since this deck was first, since this ruler was first even brought in to Curse the Frozen Casket. So without further ado, let's talk about her a little bit. So of course, zero is a human 6 ages ruler with a judgment cost of 2 light, which is great for what she does on her backside. She energizes for light, and you can either pay light to target a resonator and give it +1/+1 until end of turn, or you can pay dark to target a J resonator and it loses flying, first strike, swiftness, precision, and imperishable until end of the turn. So you either get buffing or nullifying, and both of those come into play with this deck, which you'll see in a little bit. Now on her backside, zero is infamous for being very, very hard to kill. She comes in as an 11/11 J ruler, which stat-wise is fantastic, because a lot of people know how to deal with 10/10s. 11/11s tend to be a little bit tougher. She comes with natural precision, which makes her really good for dealing with resonators, dealing with a lot of threats. She has a lot of removal options, so removing other things and then being able to target down the big things that you want to get rid of is always fantastic. She prevents all damage that be dealt to her while she's battling. So if she battles, if she attacks and somebody declares a blocker, she takes no damage until the end of that battle, which is fantastic. And the last effect, kind of like a mass version of her front side, is that all J resonators your opponent controls lose and cannot gain flying, first strike, swiftness, precision, and imperishable. So you nullify all the keywords on your opponent's side that can't gain them, can't bring it back. It's like as soon as she's on this side, your opponent loses everything, which is super, super strong. And that makes zero a really formidable threat in the current game, especially in like the local scenes where you really want to be denying your opponents from playing their fun combos, and zero's really good at that. So that's the ruler. Of course, zero is just fantastic. She gives you a win condition on both sides of her, which is super, super strong, and just being able to play with her is really fun. I highly recommend you play with her if you haven't already. Going on to the stone lineup, pretty standard stuff for most zero decks. We have 4 Heaven's Rift, being able to produce black and white. It's great because of her front side. 3 Black Silence, which allows you to produce green. Green's another, color that this deck tends to use a lot. And same with Gusting Skies for green as well as white. So essentially you get 7 black sources, 7 white sources, and 6 green sources, which is really good, nice and balanced. The deck comes with a lot of balancing factors to it, and it's very, very rewarding to hold on to your resources and know which ones to use at which times. So moving on to the main deck, if I can lift the main deck off the table, we've got, starting off, the deck actually plays no 1-drops due to the fact that it's your first turn play is normally going to be either discarding something for your opponent's hand or just passing. So the first resonator you'll see here, we have 4 Melfees. Melfee does a lot of really good mana fixing for this deck. It produces more mana so you can start ramping up a little further, going into your late game threats, and of course being able to have a quick cast card that can produce white and use zero's first effect to buff herself is fantastic. So she definitely adds on to the win condition of the deck going forward. Deck also plays 3 Abdul. Abdul is just like probably one of the best cards for its stats, for its effect. Having an ability to shut down your opponent's and her effects is great, just because this deck is very stun heavy, especially with zero's front side. Having another stun card on top of the stun effect, fantastic. Same thing kind of comes with zero the King's Blade, having your opponent unable to return things to the hand, and the fact that your opponent cannot draw cards except for, the draw phase that they have. They can't draw more than one card per turn. Being able to shut down your opponent's ability to search for answers is really, really good, especially if they're like, I want to play a card that will that will draw things from my deck, because I want to dig for an answer. Can't do that with 0 on the board, and you can quick cast her in to nullify the effects of those kind of cards, which is fantastic. And again, the 600 stats, same with Abdul, really powerful. The last 2-drop he played was 2 Shade, Envoy of Darkness, just having extra life gain effects, having a body that recurs itself with its resonance ability, having just ways to deal with early game threats. It's just very, very strong, and Shade does what it does better than almost any other card in the game, so definitely a solid 2 of there. For 3-drops, the only 3-drop he played was Glorius, the Silver Knight. Glorius is just really good because if your opponent plays anything that deals damage to something, if he does damage to you, to a Resonator you control, if they're trying to remove your board using Resonators, Glorius comes in with Quick Cast. Again, Quick Cast is a huge theme for this deck. The fact that a lot of the threats in this deck can be played at any time makes your opponent a little bit more wary of attacking. The only thing you probably won't use much is that effect where it gains +2 and first strike until end of turn, but occasionally I've seen him use this with Melfee, produce the red, get the first strike and swiftness, first strike and +2, 100 attack, but most of the time you're just going to be quick casting him in, trying to remove a Resonator, and then buffing him with 0 for the win. The last Resonator he played in this deck was Pricia, ready for the final battle. Pricia is more of like a snowball-y card that he tended to use, just because as soon as you summon her, you kill something with less attack than her, and when you do, she gets +2. She gets 2 counters. She gets the same effect when she attacks as well. So once you start ramping it up, and also ramping up her attack power with 0's frontside ability, where you give her +1/+1, she can be a massive, massive threat that can deal with a lot of threats. One thing is that she can I think she can, if you buff her up to about 1700, you can kill Skyscraper Giants with her. Just very, very strong card, and while she's costly, she is a board swing card, which is great. So that's it for Resonators. The rest of this is basically just Chant and Addition control. Pretty standard stuff. We'll see 4 Scorn of Dark Alice, and 3 the Nameless Mist. You have 7 discard cards, so your first turn is normally going to be seeing what your opponent has, knowing their information, and ripping their hand apart, which is always a pain to deal with if you're the opponent, but if you're the 0 player, stun and information is your game. Along with these 7 1-cost chants, we also have Heteroclite Excalibur. Again, single target removal for the cost of 1 mana and 500 life is fantastic. This card is unbelievably strong and definitely holds a place in a lot of players' hearts or minds if they're remembering it with a little bit of distaste. So definitely good for removal. Speaking of removal, can't be a 0 deck without 0's Magic Light. This card is the cheapest removal this game has ever seen. Just because it does remove an attacking or blocking J Resonator for 2 mana or 1 mana if your ruler is 0. And having that just easy removal without having to pay life for it, having this on top of a Heteroclite Excalibur, means that almost all of your opponent's threats will be out of the game, and you'll be able to freely attack using 0 or 0's front side with all your other Resonators. If you haven't had enough removal, we've also got Salt Debt. Almost every removal piece in this deck actually ends up either removing something from the game or putting it back on the bottom of the deck. Almost nothing destroys something and puts it into the graveyard, so that tends to be a denial factor for a lot of decks, which is really, really good for this deck. But Soul Dead is a quick cast card that put target Resonator that was put into the field this turn to the bottom of its owner's deck. So you can bury something your opponent controls back to the bottom of their deck, and they'll have to either search it out or wait until the end of the game to see it again. And of course, nobody likes hearing that. So deck has tons of removal in that regard. As far as cancels go, his main source of stopping things from happening is Final Breeze. And while it's not technically a cancel, What it does is that you return a target spell to the opponent's hand, and if you torrent it, your opponent cannot play spells until end of turn. So what this ends up doing is that you put a, say they're playing a chant for 3 mana, while that's on the chase, you target it with this card, put it back into their hand. Because it's in the hand, the spell does not resolve, and they basically wasted their turn while you were able to pseudo-cancel it for 2 mana. Again, they'll be able to use it later, but at the same time, it buys you a turn, and sometimes a turn is all you need for this deck. Also, that torrent ability is really good. Like, really, really good. And being able to shut your opponent down after canceling something is fantastic, especially when you're going into the late game with 0 and your opponent needs to answer your threats. From there, he also played 3 Severing Winds. Again, this is a green deck, green stun deck that needs cancels. If you're playing a green stun deck, Severing Winds is a no-brainer. Having the ability to just cancel something for free, especially going into the late game. I've mentioned before that 0 in the late game is fantastic, and this card definitely helps it with that. So, definitely not a 4-of slot, just because some people tend to play around it a little bit, but being able to play it for 4 mana is also pretty good. And the last card in the deck is Zero Circle of Protection, being able to call any color and making it so your opponent can't target your stuff with that. If you're playing against monocolor decks, this is great. If you're playing against decks that only have removal with 1 color, this is also great. And if your opponent is playing a rush heavy deck and doesn't need to target your things, you can side this out. But Zero Circle is just a fantastic card in that regard, and is just pretty much a control staple if you're playing white and need a way to solidify your board and make it so that your opponent has even more of a difficult time removing anything. Again, Zero's already hard to remove on her own as an 11/11 that can't be damaged. Giving her barrier against a certain color, whether it be like black or red or any of those, is pretty much a game winner on its own. So definitely a good card to keep in mind, and definitely a really nice little one-up for the deck. And with that, that is the entirety of the deck. Thank you all for suggesting we profile this deck. Anthony's been using this for a long time now, really enjoys it, and is glad that you guys enjoyed watching him play it against Scott's deck. So again, please leave comments down below, like the video, subscribe, and show us your 0 decks, because we would love to compare and contrast. This has been Mike from Deepwood Force of Will, signing out.